You are scrolling through an old forgotten playlist on your phone. You pause on a collection of obscure indie folk songs you haven't listened to in years, trying to remember why you ever liked them. You look at a highly specific hobby, maybe indoor rock climbing, or analog photography, or baking complex sourdough breads, that you suddenly dropped the exact second a past relationship ended. You find yourself staring at a heavy winter jacket hanging in the back of your closet, a piece of clothing you bought 3 years ago, wondering who that person even was. You look at the scattered remnants of your past phases and you think you just grew up. You tell yourself you simply moved on, evolved, or naturally matured into the highly independent person you are today. But the truth is far more invasive and completely out of your conscious control. Your brain was actively hijacked. Your core biological programming was quietly, systematically rewritten by someone else's operating system. Within just 1/5 of a second of locking eyes with a romantic interest, a massive neurological cascade begins inside your skull. 12 different highly specialized areas of your brain fire in absolute perfect unison. They flood your central nervous system with a potent, overwhelming chemical cocktail that literally alters your neural architecture. It changes exactly how your neurons communicate with each other. It dictates what your sensory organs prioritize and what they actively, deliberately ignore. If your personality, your rigid tastes, and your daily habits can be overwritten so quickly by the mere presence of another human being, were they ever really yours to begin with? You are going to understand exactly how the person you love becomes a physical, measurable part of your brain circuitry. You will see how they quietly erase the old you in the process, leaving behind a completely altered hybrid identity. But to understand how you lost yourself so completely, we have to look at the exact moment your brain decided you weren't enough on your own. Think back to the quiet, solitary months right before you met your last great love. You had your strict daily routines mapped out by the hour. You had your specific aesthetic, your carefully curated tastes in food, art, and weekend entertainment. You enforced your very clear, rigid emotional boundaries with everyone around you. You operated in the modern world as a completely closed, self-sustaining biological system. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical, critical, judgmental executive center located right behind your forehead, was fully online and fully in charge. You judged people clearly. You assessed their flaws, their annoying habits, and their glaring red flags with razor-sharp precision. You knew exactly what you liked, and you fiercely defended those preferences. You knew exactly what you hated, and you avoided it at all costs. You knew precisely what you would never, under any circumstances, tolerate from another human being. You were in absolute solitary control of your reality, but maintaining that level of absolute psychological control is biologically exhausting. Human brains are simply not wired for long-term, absolute independence. Underneath that strong, self-sufficient exterior, your gray matter is constantly burning immense amounts of metabolic energy just to keep your psychological defenses up. It is exhausted. It is relentlessly seeking a biological excuse to outsource its heavy cognitive load to another person. In 2005, biological anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher at Rutgers University decided to map this exact vulnerability. She placed individuals who had just fallen intensely in love inside functional MRI machines. She wasn't looking for poetry, romance, or philosophical metaphors about the human soul. She was tracking the raw mechanical flow of oxygenated blood deep within the basal ganglia. She discovered that romantic love is not an emotion at all. It is a fundamental, primitive mammalian drive. It is wired deep into the reptilian reward system of the brain. It operates right next to the exact primal circuits that control basic physiological thirst and extreme physical hunger. Your brain treats the acquisition of a romantic partner as a literal survival mechanism, inherited from ancestors who couldn't survive the harsh environment of the savannah alone. It actively prepares to sacrifice your fiercely guarded individuality to secure a biological alliance. And the exact moment you find that right person, your brain doesn't just politely invite them into your life. It actively and aggressively shuts down your own internal security systems so they can take complete control over the wheel. The hostile takeover begins with a literal chemical flood. Massive, overwhelming waves of dopamine surge from the ventral tegmental area, flooding your neural pathways. This chemical storm makes you obsessive, intensely hyper-focused, and relentlessly driven toward this single human being. Every text message they send hits your dopamine receptors like a casino slot machine paying out a massive jackpot. Simultaneously, your cortisol levels experience a dramatic, sustained spike. You are placed in a literal, prolonged state of biological stress and acute anxiety. Your body is essentially panicking, vibrating with the urgency of securing and keeping this new person in your life. But the detail everyone ignores, the layer that changes everything about who you are, is what happens to your internal alarm systems. Neurobiologist Samir Zeki at University College London conducted groundbreaking studies mapping the brains of people staring at photographs of their romantic partners. He documented a severe, measurable deactivation in the amygdala and the frontal cortex. These are the exact neurological zones responsible for processing fear, generating negative emotions, and executing critical judgment. When you fall in love, you don't just choose to put on rose-colored glasses. You don't just consciously decide to ignore their glaring red flags out of the goodness of your forgiving heart. You physically, biologically lose the ability to perceive those red flags. Your neural threat detection software is forcibly uninstalled from your operating system. This profound neurological suppression triggers a strange, highly invasive psychological phenomenon known as self-expansion. Without the rigid borders of critical judgment to keep the outside world out, your brain starts coding the other person's traits as your own. Their hobbies, their weird memories, and their specific preferences bleed seamlessly into your neural pathways. Their favorite, highly obscure band literally maps onto your brain's reward center, as if you had grown up loving that exact genre of music. Their political leanings start to quietly rewire your own sense of morality. Their unusual sleeping habits effortlessly alter your biological circadian rhythm. You do this every single time you suddenly find yourself fiercely defending a movie you hadn't even heard of 3 months ago, just because they happen to love it. You adopt their specific vocabulary, using their catchphrases without thinking. You unconsciously mirror their exact posture when you sit across from them. You suddenly crave their favorite foods, dismissing the meals you used to eat every single day. It all sounds like a cute romantic metaphor about two souls intertwining. Until scientists started putting human beings in fMRI machines and watched the physical borders of human identity literally vanish on a glowing screen. Dr. Arthur Aarons spent his entire academic life at the State University of New York trying to measure exactly how human beings merge. In 1992, he wanted to know if the concept of becoming one was just cheap greeting card poetry or hard, undeniable neurology. He designed an experiment to test the physical and cognitive limits of human identity. Imagine sitting completely alone in a cold, quiet, sterile laboratory room. You are staring at a blank, glowing computer screen. Suddenly, a rapid-fire series of traits and adjectives begins flashing before your eyes. Independent, creative, stubborn, ambitious, introverted. Some of these words describe you perfectly. Some of them describe your romantic partner. Some of them describe a complete anonymous stranger. Your only task is to press a button as fast as physically possible to indicate who the word matches. It sounds incredibly simple. It should be entirely effortless for a healthy, functioning adult to know exactly who they are and what traits they possess. When a trait applied to both the participant and their partner, people reacted with lightning speed. The brain processed this shared reality instantly, with absolute zero cognitive friction. But the experiment had a psychological trap built directly into it. When subjects were forced to distinguish between a trait they possessed and a trait that only their partner possessed, everything broke down. Their reaction time suddenly plummeted. Their brains physically stuttered. They hesitated, experiencing literal cognitive confusion while trying to figure out where their own personality ended and their partner's began. The neural processing speed collapsed because the brain had to search through its newly merged, corrupted database. It was desperately trying to separate two completely distinct identities that it now considered to be structurally identical. The milliseconds of delay proved that the boundaries of the self had been completely compromised. In the physical neurological map of your mind, the concept of me and the concept of you had merged into the exact same coordinates. Your brain literally no longer recognized a biological difference between your existence and theirs. But this absolute, beautiful, total merging of identities comes with a brutal side effect. One that you only notice when the chemicals finally, inevitably wear off. The crash is driven by an inevitable, purely biological drop in dopamine and cortisol. Usually 12 to 18 months into a relationship, the so-called honeymoon phase abruptly ends. Society treats this like a psychological shift or a failure of character. People panic, thinking it is a sign that they chose the wrong person or that the magic is permanently gone. But it is just a neurological sobering up. That intoxicating, overwhelming feeling of perfect unity evaporates from your synapses. Your frontal cortex, which has been dormant and starved of resources for over a year, finally wakes back up and demands electricity. Suddenly, the way they chew their food is deafeningly loud. Their opinions on politics or art, which you once found charmingly eccentric, suddenly sound weird or completely irrational. The absolute seamless overlap of your identities violently splinters. You look at the clothes they bought for you, or the weekend routine you adopted to match theirs, and you feel a sudden, urgent need for physical and mental space, but you get your critical thinking back. You regain the rigid defensive boundaries that protect your individual survival. The relationship transitions away from a chaotic, blind chemical hijack. It moves into a conscious, steady, deliberate attachment driven by the stabilizing, long-term force of oxytocin. The very blindness that allowed you to fall in love is the exact thing you have to lose to actually build a real life with someone. That terrifying moment of waking up, looking at your partner across the kitchen table and wondering, who is this person, isn't the relationship failing. It is your brain finally, after months of captivity, giving you your keys back. You don't simply fall in love. Your brain undergoes a temporary, localized, structural rewiring to fuse your identity with someone else's. You lose yourself so completely, so thoroughly, that their biological survival, their strange quirks, and their mundane preferences become indistinguishable from your own. If your tastes, your harsh judgments, and your very sense of self can be overwritten in a matter of weeks by the mere presence of a new person, then the you that you are so fiercely protective of isn't a solid object. It is a fluid, highly unstable construct. It is just a temporary, ever-shifting reflection of the people you allow to get close to you. Look back at the person you are today. Strip away everything you think is permanent. How many of your absolute favorite things, your deeply held beliefs, or your mundane daily habits actually belong to someone you once loved? We spend our whole lives fiercely trying to find ourselves, without ever realizing we are made entirely of the pieces of the people